Have you ever wondered what it feels like to be hunted by your own kind? The wind howled through the towering pines, a reminder of how unforgiving the northern forests could be. In the distance, the faint rustle of leaves and the occasional snap of a twig echoed through the woods. Grey Wolf, a massive grey beast whose very presence commanded the forest, moved like a shadow among the trees. His coat blended seamlessly with the winter landscape, each step calculated and deliberate. But today was different. Today, the forest seemed unusually silent, an ominous stillness hanging in the air. Jack Monroe, a seasoned police officer, had been running for hours, his breath ragged as he pushed through the dense underbrush. His heart hammered in his chest, not just from the physical exertion, but from the weight of the betrayal that hung over him. He had trusted them, the brothers in blue, his comrades, but they weren't the men he thought they were. He had uncovered something so corrupt that it had made him a target. And now his so-called brothers were hunting him down like prey. Jack's hand brushed against the rough bark of a tree, his senses on high alert. Every noise felt like a threat, every shadow hiding something dangerous. The weight of his badge, the symbol of authority, suddenly felt like a curse. He was alone deep in the woods, with no one to trust but himself. But just as his resolve was starting to crack, a piercing growl cut through the air, freezing him in place. His eyes darted around, but there was nothing. Not a movement, not a sound. Was it his mind playing tricks on him, or had something or someone seen him? Suddenly there it was, a blur of grey fur darting through the trees too fast for Jack to react. His heart skipped a beat, and for the first time in his life he felt a surge of pure fear. What if this wasn't just any animal? What if something or someone was out there watching him? Was he truly alone? Or was there something in the woods that might offer him a strange kind of help? Who or what could be out here with me? Jack thought, his mind racing as the growls grew louder. And then, like a force of nature, it emerged from the shadows, Grey Wolf standing tall and unyielding. The loup-garou of the forest, the creature that the locals whispered about but never spoke of in full. His eyes, cold and calculating, locked onto Jack's. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. The beast and the cop, two beings from entirely different worlds staring at each other. But was this a sign of hope, or the beginning of something far darker? Jack stumbled through the underbrush, his body aching, but his mind sharp as ever. He couldn't afford to let his guard down. Not now. Not when the stakes were this high. His breath came in ragged gasps, every inhalation a reminder of how close he was to losing everything. The police officer had been betrayed, but this wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about justice, or at least his idea of it. He had crossed the line, uncovered too much. He had seen things that would never be the same again. But what he hadn't expected was to be saved by the very thing he'd once dismissed as a myth, the Grey Wolf. It felt like a dream, like he was lost in a nightmare where the rules no longer applied. A wolf, the size of a small horse, had appeared from the shadows and driven away the dangers that had been hunting him. But Jack couldn't shake the feeling that the wolf wasn't there just out of kindness. What did the creature want from him? Am I supposed to trust a wolf? Jack wondered, his eyes scanning the dark woods for any signs of danger. The chill of the night seemed to deepen, a reminder that this was no ordinary encounter. Or is this all just a trap? A rustling behind him broke his train of thought. He spun around, heart racing, expecting the worst. Instead, there stood Grey Wolf, his massive form emerging from the shadows like an embodiment of the forest itself. The loup-garou, as the locals called him, had a presence that was almost surreal. He wasn't just an animal, he was something more, something ancient, untamed and yet undeniably aware of the world around him. The wolf didn't move, just watched Jack with those piercing yellow eyes that seemed to see straight through him. It was as if the creature could understand him, could sense his fears, his doubts. And yet, there was a strange comfort in his presence. For a moment, Jack considered his options. He could try to run. He could flee deeper into the woods, abandoning everything he had known. But that would mean giving up, letting the corrupt officers who had betrayed him win. And that wasn't something he could do. Instead, he stood still. No words were exchanged, but there was an unspoken understanding between them. The wolf wasn't there to harm him, at least not yet. But what did Grey Wolf want from him? Why are you helping me? Jack muttered, more to himself than the creature. The answer didn't come in words. It didn't need to. The wolf moved closer, sitting down beside him, its presence calming in a way that Jack couldn't explain. Was it a sign? A warning? Or was it a silent promise? One that would lead him down a path he couldn't yet understand. Jack couldn't answer that, but one thing was certain: he was no longer alone. And that was both comforting and terrifying. Jack sat motionless, the weight of the wolf's presence sinking into his bones. The forest, once a hostile environment, now felt strangely quiet, almost peaceful. The moonlight filtered through the canopy above, casting a cold, silvery glow over the scene. He had expected fear, panic, maybe even a sense of dread. But instead, all he felt was a strange calm. Grey Wolf had not attacked, not pounced as he had feared. Instead, the creature seemed to watch over him, as though understanding the turmoil swirling inside his chest. Jack swallowed hard, forcing the words out. "I don't understand. Why are you helping me?" The wolf's yellow eyes never wavered from his face. There was no response, no vocal answer, just a silent presence that seemed to offer Jack a choice, a path forward. But Jack wasn't sure which way that path led. He had once believed in the purity of his badge, in the honor of his brothers in blue. But after what he'd discovered, after what they'd tried to do to him, those ideals felt like a distant memory, a lie. Grey Wolf, though a creature of instinct and nature, seemed more real than any of the men he had once trusted. He wondered for the first time if it was the wolf, this giant beast who lived outside the confines of law and corruption, that had the clarity Jack was so desperately searching for. The sound of branches snapping brought Jack's attention back to the moment. His hand instinctively reached for the gun at his side, though he knew it wouldn't do much against the dangers lurking in the woods, or the men hunting him. "Do you think they're still out there?" Jack whispered to the wolf, as if Grey Wolf could answer him. In the distance, the sound of a vehicle engine broke through the stillness. A low rumble echoed off the trees, the unmistakable sound of a police cruiser. Jack froze. His heart beat faster, panic rising in his chest. He was no longer just being hunted by rogue officers. He was in danger of becoming a target for the whole department. No one was safe, and no one would believe the truth if he told them. Grey Wolf stood up suddenly, his body tense, his eyes scanning the woods. Jack followed his gaze but saw nothing. Was the wolf more attuned to the forest, to the dangers in it, than he was? Or was there something else, something Jack didn't understand yet, at play? "What do we do now?" Jack muttered under his breath. The rumble of the engine grew louder, and Jack's pulse quickened. He had to make a choice: run deeper into the woods and risk getting lost, or confront whatever was coming. But how could he face the very men who had betrayed him? Could the wolf truly help him navigate this nightmare? Could this ancient creature offer him the guidance he so desperately needed? As if answering Jack's question, Grey Wolf moved toward him, stopping just in front of him. The massive animal sat once more, the weight of its gaze pressing down on Jack. The world around him seemed to hold its breath. "Are you going to protect me?" Jack asked softly, unsure if he even believed his own words. The wolf's eyes never left him. The answer wasn't spoken, it wasn't needed. In the quiet darkness of the forest, with the weight of his former life hanging in the balance, Jack understood. The path ahead would not be easy. But it was a path he would have to walk, whether with the wolf or against the men who had betrayed him. He wasn't sure which way the road led, but Grey Wolf was no longer just an animal to him. He was an ally. Whether Jack liked it or not, the sound of the engine drew closer, and Jack's instincts kicked in. He rose to his feet, his heart racing. The forest was still, the tension so thick it felt like the air itself was holding its breath. The police cruiser wasn't far off. He could hear the low hum of the tires against the dirt road, getting closer with each passing second. Grey Wolf remained calm, unwavering. His body was low to the ground, but his eyes never strayed from the path ahead. There was no fear in the wolf, only an awareness that Jack couldn't quite grasp. How could an animal, no, a creature, be so sure of its surroundings, so unafraid of the danger that Jack himself could sense creeping closer? Jack had always trusted his training, his instincts. He had been taught to think, to calculate every move, every risk. But now, in this strange partnership with the wolf, it felt like the rules had changed. There were no manuals, no protocols. He was just a man in the wild, running from enemies who could be anyone. And that thought terrified him. Jack had always trusted his training, his instincts. He had been taught to think, to calculate every move, every risk. But now, in this strange partnership with the wolf, it felt like the rules had changed. There were no manuals, no protocols. He was just a man in the wild, running from enemies who could be anyone, and that thought terrified him. "Where do we go from here?" Jack whispered, not expecting an answer, but still hoping for some direction. Grey Wolf didn't respond, only continued to study the approaching vehicle. It was clear the wolf was waiting for something, but Jack wasn't sure what. The cruiser's headlights finally broke through the trees. Jack ducked instinctively, heart pounding. The vehicle crept along the winding dirt road, its engine humming softly. Jack's breath caught in his throat. He could almost hear the pounding footsteps of his former brothers in blue, ready to close in on him. But why wasn't Grey Wolf moving? For a moment, Jack was frozen, torn between running and staying hidden. He couldn't afford to be seen, not now. But the wolf didn't seem to be worried. Instead, he stood his ground. Jack could feel the air shift, as if the forest itself had become part of their battle. Are you going to fight?" Jack muttered under his breath, his eyes scanning the woods for any sign of movement. Grey Wolf seemed to hear him. The wolf's ears perked up and his body tensed. Jack knew it wasn't a question of if they were going to fight. It was when. And how. The cruiser came to a stop just yards from their position. Jack's pulse raced, his mind working furiously, trying to calculate his next move. If the officers saw him now, they would take him down. No questions, no hesitation. He wasn't just another cop anymore, he was a target, a liability to the very system that had once been his life. The door of the cruiser creaked open, and Jack's eyes darted to the figure emerging from the vehicle. It was hard to make out at first, but then he saw the uniform, the familiar blue, the face of a man he once trusted. "Officer Ramirez, Jack," Ramirez called, his voice carrying in the stillness of the forest. "I know you're out here. Come on, man. We can help you. Just come back with us." "This isn't you." Jack's throat tightened. The betrayal he had felt earlier surged back, raw and painful. Ramirez was one of them. One of the officers who had turned their backs on him. And yet here he was, pretending to offer help. Grey Wolf moved closer to Jack, his massive form casting a shadow over him. The wolf's presence was undeniable, a reminder that Jack wasn't alone. But even with the creature standing beside him, Jack felt the weight of his decision heavy in the pit of his stomach. Should he trust Ramirez? Or was this just another trap, another attempt to lure him back into the fold where his life was no longer his own? "Don't trust him," a voice inside Jack's mind whispered. "They're all the same. They'll bring you down." Jack's hand instinctively went to his side, his fingers brushing the cold metal of his gun. He knew he couldn't go back, not now. Not after everything he had learned. He took a deep breath, his heart still pounding, and turned to face Grey Wolf. "Do you think they'll stop, even if I go with them?" Jack asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "What if they're just waiting for me to let my guard down?" The wolf's yellow eyes locked onto Jack's once more, and for a fleeting moment, it felt as if the beast understood exactly what Jack was feeling. The uncertainty, the fear, the need to survive. With a growl, Grey Wolf took a step forward, a silent declaration that Jack didn't have to face this alone. The cruiser's headlights flickered, casting long shadows over the ground, as if time itself was waiting for Jack's answer. The silence of the forest seemed deafening, as Jack and Grey Wolf stood side by side, facing the approaching officer. Ramirez's voice, still calling out from the cruiser, faded into the background, drowned out by the intensity of Jack's thoughts. His heart raced, a chaotic rhythm in his chest. He had to decide. The cruiser's headlights cast long shadows over the trees, their beams slicing through the darkness. Jack knew that with each passing second, he was getting closer to a point of no return. The officers in the cruiser weren't just looking for him, they were hunting him. And no matter what Ramirez said, Jack knew that the life he once had was gone. Grey Wolf's growl reverberated in the air, a low, rumbling sound that seemed to echo through the trees. The wolf was alert now, his body tense, ready for whatever came next. Jack could feel the shift in the air as the weight of the decision pressed down on him. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about who he was going to become. "Jack," Ramirez shouted again, more urgently this time, "you don't have to do this. We can help you. I can help you, man. Just come back with us. Jack didn't respond. He couldn't. The words felt hollow, meaningless. Ramirez had helped him once, yes. But that was before everything changed. That was before he saw the truth. He wasn't going to be anyone's pawn again. Do you really think they'll help you? Grey Wolf's unspoken message hit him like a punch to the gut. The wolf stepped closer, standing tall and unwavering. For a moment, Jack wondered if the wolf had ever faced such a choice in his own life. Could an animal even understand the weight of such a decision? But in Grey Wolf's gaze, Jack saw something he hadn't expected: understanding. An understanding that went beyond instinct, beyond animal nature. Jack's grip tightened around his gun, his fingers cold against the metal. He had been a cop. He had believed in the system. He had trusted his brothers in blue, fought alongside them. But now they were the ones he had to escape. Grey Wolf had saved him. The wolf had offered him a chance, something no one else could. But it wasn't just about escaping anymore. It was about what Jack could stand for in a world that seemed to have lost its integrity. Ramirez took a few tentative steps toward him, his eyes pleading. "Jack, please, just..." The rest of his words were drowned out by the distant sound of more engines, the unmistakable roar of another police cruiser. It was a signal, one that Jack didn't need to be told. More were coming. His time was running out. Jack looked at Grey Wolf, his heart heavy with uncertainty. The wolf's eyes met his, the silence between them thick and full of meaning. For the first time in his life, Jack understood what it meant to trust in something greater than himself. Something wild, untamed, and free. The wolf wasn't offering him an escape. He was offering him a chance to reclaim what had been stolen: the truth, his life, and his honor. Without a word, Jack turned away from Ramirez, stepping deeper into the woods. Grey Wolf moved with him, his massive form blending seamlessly into the shadows, a guardian in the dark. Ramirez's voice cracked through the air, desperate. "Jack, don't do this!" "It's not too late. You're making a mistake." Jack didn't turn back. He couldn't. He had already made his choice. The wolf had shown him a path that he hadn't known existed, one that led away from the lies, from the men who would betray him, and towards something more. It was dangerous. It was uncertain. But it was real. He was done running from the truth. With every step, the distance between him and the life he once knew grew greater. But for the first time in what felt like forever, Jack felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe the wolf could guide him. Maybe, just maybe, there was still a chance for redemption. As the cruiser's headlights faded into the distance, Jack asked the question that had been lingering in his mind since he first met Grey Wolf. Where do we go from here? And as the wolf's growl rumbled softly in the night, Jack knew that the journey ahead was only just beginning. The further they moved into the woods, the more the outside world seemed to fade away. Jack's mind was still racing, his thoughts spinning in circles as he tried to process everything that had happened, everything he had left behind. The sounds of the police cruisers and Ramirez's desperate calls were a distant memory now, swallowed up by the vastness of the forest. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. Jack could feel the cool, crisp wind biting at his skin, but it wasn't just the temperature that made him feel alive. It was the sense of freedom, the strange sense that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't completely alone. Grey Wolf was still by his side, moving through the trees like a shadow, his presence both a comfort and a reminder that the path ahead was unknown. The wolf hadn't led Jack down a clear road, nor had he given any indication of where they were headed. But Jack had stopped asking questions. There was a kind of peace in that silence. It was as if the forest itself had swallowed their pasts and their fears, leaving only the present. And in that moment, Jack felt more alive than he had in years. Jack glanced at Grey Wolf, who was now walking slightly ahead, his ears perked, his gaze ever watchful. The bond between them had solidified in those few quiet moments, and Jack understood that this wasn't just an accidental encounter. The wolf wasn't just guiding him through the woods. He was guiding him through something deeper, something he couldn't fully explain. For the first time in a long while, Jack felt like he had a purpose, but it wasn't the purpose of a cop, of a man tied to a system that had betrayed him. No, this was something different. This was a fight for survival, yes, but also for something more. Something that was impossible to find in the corrupt world he had left behind. The crack of a branch underfoot snapped Jack back to reality. His hand instinctively went to his side, where his gun was holstered, but he quickly realized that he wasn't going to find safety with a weapon anymore. The danger wasn't in the gun or in the system. It was in what lay ahead. "Where are we going, Grey Wolf?" Jack muttered, his voice barely more than a whisper. But the wolf didn't answer, only continued moving through the forest with that same purposeful stride. Jack took a deep breath. Maybe the question doesn't matter anymore, he thought. As they continued their journey deeper into the heart of the wild, the trees grew denser, the shadows darker. The world seemed to close in on them. And then out of nowhere, Jack heard it. A voice, a low murmur, barely audible over the wind. "Jack!" His heart stopped for a moment, his pulse spiking. He spun around, looking into the dense foliage, but there was nothing. No sign of the voice. Just the stillness of the forest. He shook his head, dismissing it. The stress, the exhaustion, it was all getting to him. He was imagining things, but then it came again, clearer this time. "Jack!" He turned sharply, eyes wide. This time he saw movement, shadows flickering in the trees. But they weren't like Grey Wolf, these were men. Figures in the distance, barely visible against the thickening darkness. Jack froze, his breath catching in his throat. His hand went to his gun instinctively, but he quickly realized that it wouldn't do him any good. These weren't officers. These weren't his brothers in blue. The figures moving toward him were different, strange. He took a step back, his mind racing. "Who are they?" he thought. And then the voice spoke again, but this time it wasn't calling his name. "You're not alone, Jack," the voice said, calm and steady. "We've been waiting for you." The shadows moved closer, their figures now unmistakable in the dim moonlight. Jack's hand tightened around the handle of his gun, but deep down he knew that the weapon wouldn't protect him from whatever was coming. His heart hammered in his chest, the confusion and fear building with every step the figures took toward him. Grey Wolf stood still beside him, his body tense, his eyes focused on the approaching figures. Jack could feel the wolf's presence beside him, steady and unshakable. But even the creature seemed to be waiting, unsure of what was about to unfold. "You're not alone, Jack," the voice repeated, this time louder, clearer. "We've been waiting for you." The figures emerged from the shadows, stepping into the pale light of the moon. They weren't officers. They weren't even men in uniform. They were something else entirely, dressed in rugged, weathered clothes, their faces obscured by the darkness. But what struck Jack most were their eyes. They held a knowledge, a weight, that he couldn't begin to understand. One of them, a tall man with a grizzled beard, stepped forward. "We've been watching," he said, his voice low but firm, "waiting for someone who could see what's really going on." Jack swallowed hard, his mind racing. "Who are these people?" he wondered. "What do they want with me?" "So you've uncovered the truth, Jack," the man continued, his eyes locking onto Jack's with an unsettling intensity. "You're one of us now. You always have been. The badge, the uniform, it was just a mask. But you were never truly a part of their world." Jack took a step back, his confusion growing. He had no idea who these people were, but one thing was certain. They weren't here to harm him. There was something familiar about them, something that felt real. "They're coming for you," the man said, his voice softening. "Your brothers in blue. They know you've seen the truth. They'll stop at nothing to silence you." Jack felt a knot tighten in his chest. He had known this was coming. The officers who had betrayed him, the ones he had once trusted, they would never let him go. They were already hunting him. He was a target now, a liability. "We're the ones who've been fighting against them," the man said, his voice steady. "We're the ones who know how deep the corruption goes. And we need someone like you to help us bring it all down." Jack's head spun as the weight of the man's words sank in. All this time he had thought he was alone. He had thought that Grey Wolf was his only ally. But now he realized there was a whole network of people out there fighting the same battle he was. "You're not alone, Jack," the man repeated. "You have a choice. You can keep running, hiding in the shadows, or you can stand with us and fight back." Jack looked at Grey Wolf, whose eyes were fixed on him with an almost knowing expression. The wolf had brought him here to this moment. Grey Wolf had shown him the way out of the lies and the betrayal. But was he ready to step into something even bigger? Was he ready to become part of something that could change everything? The man's voice broke through his thoughts. "This is your chance, Jack. Your chance to make a real difference." Jack stood still, his mind torn. He had been running for so long, searching for a way out of the web of lies that had trapped him. And now, standing here with the wolf by his side, and these strangers offering him a chance to fight back, he realized that his life could never be the same. "Do you trust them?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper, looking at Grey Wolf. The wolf's eyes softened, his steady gaze never leaving Jack's face. There was no answer, no words. But in that silence, Jack knew the truth. He wasn't alone anymore. With a deep breath, Jack nodded. "All right," he said, his voice filled with resolve. "So let's take them down." And as Grey Wolf stepped forward, leading Jack into the unknown, the forest seemed to embrace them. The darkness no longer felt like a threat, but like the beginning of something new. A new fight, a new purpose, and this time Jack wouldn't be fighting alone. The path ahead was unclear, filled with danger and uncertainty, but Jack knew one thing for sure: he had found his place in the world. And no one, not even the force he had once trusted, could take that from him. Together with Grey Wolf and the mysterious allies who had found him, Jack Monroe was ready to face whatever came next. The battle was just beginning. What do you think will happen next? Will Jack and Grey Wolf bring down the corrupt system, or will they face even greater danger? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Like this video if you want to see more stories like this. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode.